Welcome to Pigskin Frenzy on this wonderful Tuesday afternoon. Thank you for joining us. I'm Joel Norris, and whether you're watching on YouTube, listening on Spotify, or listening on Podbean, a big thank you for taking some time out of your Tuesday to just sit back, watch, and listen to some college football coverage presented by me. Now, if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel, leave a like on the episode, and leave a comment down below. Spotify, if you're listening on there, share around with others and follow on there as well. Podbean, same thing. Follow on there and share around with others. We have Facebook and we have Twitter. Twitter, it's at pigskin_frenzy, all lowercase. All you got to do is type that bad boy in on the search engine. You'll find it. Just follow and like the page there. You'll get episode updates as well as news, highlights, and notifications from across college and NFL football. Facebook, same thing. All you got to do is type in Pigskin Frenzy there. You'll find it. Follow and like the page there. You'll get episode updates as well as news, highlights, and notifications from across college and NFL football. Big day today for college football. We're going to be talking about some recruiting news, talking about some transfer news, just a couple of things. Not going to go too deep into it, but then we're also going to discuss to tie the episode in together, continuing our a little mini series, I guess, of conference projection standings. Last week we did the Big Ten. I said Michigan was going to win the Big Ten East, and I said that Wisconsin was going to win the Big Ten West. They were going to collide in the Big Ten championship game, and then I said Michigan was going to win and win, three-peat as Big Ten champions and advance to the college football playoff. So that's just my take on it. That was just a small recap of last week's college football episode. Go back and watch it. It's on YouTube. It's on Spotify. It's on Podbean. Go back, watch it, listen to it. Episode 22 of Pigskin Frenzy. Just share, continue to plug in and just follow around and share around with others. So, we're going to tie everything in together. Again, don't leave yet. YouTube, subscribe to the channel on there. Leave a comment on each episode and leave a like on each episode. Podbean, Spotify, share around with others and follow on those platforms as well. And follow on Twitter and Facebook. So let's just kick it off with some recruiting news. So, usually when you get recruits and it's, you got to start early, right? I mean, that's just a big thing. You got to start early. It's one of those things where, it's never too early to cash in and grab and hook a good football player, regardless of what position. So, I mean, I've seen, just for example, I've seen people get, start recruiting eighth graders. People who were in eighth grade, who were finishing up eighth grade and about to start high school as freshmen. So it's crazy. College football is one of those things where it's never too early to start, fishing for talent, right? So, this is coming from the 2024 class, and we have a commitment here. So the number one overall player in the 2024 class and the five-star quarterback, Dylan Raiola. We were wondering where he was going to go and projections. He was committed to Ohio State originally, but he decommitted in December. So now we have a new commitment from him, and it looks like it's a for sure thing. So Dylan Raiola, quarterback, five-star quarterback for the number one overall player in the recruiting class of 2024, has committed to the Georgia Bulldogs. So not a big surprise there. We were wondering if it was going to be, going to go back to Ohio State. You're thinking Miami was in play, USC was in play, along with Clemson, but Georgia was also in play there, and we were thinking, Georgia looks like they're going to land on the 24/7 Sports crystal ball predictions. It was heavily pointing towards Georgia, and they landed him. So he's a good overall talent. He's a crisp decision maker. His accuracy is good. He lights up the field, and he's an electric football player. So good pickup for Georgia here. But what does this mean for Georgia? Well, I mean, it looks like Georgia's just doing Georgia things. So Georgia is literally, amongst the elite now in college football, and we're just going to have to get used to it in terms of recruiting, in terms of facilities, in terms of on-the-field play, you name it. They are coaching, position groups, defense, you name it. They are amongst the elite in college football. Not just the SEC, but in all of overall college football. So you're just going to have to get used to it. Right? Back-to-back defending national champion Georgia Bulldogs looking for a three-peat this season, and with all the projections going on now, it's looking like Georgia could do it. So who knows, right? I think, it's one of those things where Georgia, again, still amongst the elite. They are, looks like they're, trying to have a good bounce back, after losing a lot to the draft. However, with one thing that Georgia has is depth. Depth is something that always, was occurring in Alabama when Kirby Smart was the defensive coordinator there. Bama still has depth, but what I'm saying is Georgia has taken a lot of what Alabama has done in their like dominant years. And don't get me wrong, Alabama still has dominant moments, but I'm saying in their earlier years of when Kirby Smart was their defensive coordinator, he has learned everything that Nick Saban has done and has taken and twisted his own little approach to it and has implemented it all in Athens. So they are literally Bama 2.0 in Athens, Georgia right now. They are Bama East, as we call them. So, yeah, Georgia doing Georgia big things. That's what it means. It doesn't mean really a whole lot. It just means that Georgia's still in the running. Georgia's still one of the amongst the elite in college football, and we're just going to have to get used to, Georgia picking up players like a Dylan Raiola and any, top talent in each recruiting class. So as long as Kirby Smart's there and he's still coaching, just get used to Georgia, Georgia being in it in college football every year. So moving on, let's do some transfers. So that was all the big recruiting talk there. So let's just move on to some transfers here. So one transfer that caught my eye was this, and it was former Notre Dame running back Logan Diggs. He entered the transfer portal looking for a fresh start, and he apparently has found one. So he was recruited by Brian Kelly. So it's looking like he is heading back there. So former Notre Dame running back Logan Diggs is transferred to LSU. So good pickup for LSU there. They needed some depth in the running backs. I think I touched on that a little bit while I was giving my spring football results on LSU a few weeks back. They need some depth in the running back position. While John Emery is now suspended again academically, they need some help depth wise in the backfield. So you got Noah Cain, the transfer from Penn State, Baton Rouge native. Noah Cain is probably their safe bet as a starter. Then you got Amarne Goodwin. Amarne Goodwin is one of the fastest players and most underrated players probably in the SEC in the backfield. So, you got him, you got Noah Cain, and now you also got you got a power back in Noah Cain, you got a more of a speedy type back in Armani Goodwin, then you got the best of both worlds with Logan Diggs. So Logan Diggs comes in and he's going to bring, some elusiveness, and he's also going to bring some balance. He's also going to bring some speed, and he's going to bring some power, He's got some power to him, which is good. He's a fast runner, but he brings some power too. He's an underrated power runner. And I think that, he's going to add some much needed depth to the backfield at LSU. Baton Rouge, was calling him home, and he's a native. So it all fits. Brian Kelly's there, the coach that recruited him to Notre Dame. He's there. Logan Diggs going back home to Baton Rouge. It's home for him again. Brian Kelly recruited him. It all makes sense. So that's a big transfer pickup for LSU there. Logan Diggs heading to Baton Rouge, headed to LSU there. So that's all from some recruiting and transfer news. And we're going to move on, and we're going to tie everything in together. It's probably going to be a shorter episode than normal, but it doesn't matter, right? We're going to all tie it in together with the Pac-12 anyway. So I just wanted to touch on some recruiting and some transfer news there. So let's move on to the Pac-12 standings and the conference projection standings. I started this kind of mini series of, doing projections. Y'all all told me, okay, projections don't matter. Not until August or, not until the game's actually played. Yes, I understand that. Projections get busted. Michigan and Wisconsin, I mentioned that how they were going to be in the Big Ten title game last season, this coming up season, but you never know. It could, for all I know, Rutgers may win, may win the East, and, Northwestern may win the West. It may be a Rutgers and Northwestern Big Ten championship. Likely not going to happen, but you never know. It's just football. You never know what happens. Projections get busted all the time. So I was saying that Michigan and Wisconsin are, in my favorites, the odds-on favorite to win their divisions and to go to the Big Ten championship in Indianapolis first weekend in December. So, I mean, continuing on with the trend, we're talking about the Pac-12 now, and I think it's fun to do these projections just to see, you know, the takes of everybody and where people are standing now heading into the fall. So these are solely based on where things stand now. So just to make that clear, I'm not going to sit there and say that it won't change, because I think projections will change. I said that last week. I think projections are going to change. If Ohio State looks better than Michigan, I may pick Ohio State over Michigan, but right now I'm currently picking Michigan over Ohio State because I like where Michigan's headed just a tiny bit better than Ohio State. I like Ohio State, and I think Ohio State is going to make a New Year's Six Bowl. However, right now, I don't know if they're going to make the playoffs. Now, who knows? They may make the playoffs again as a one-loss team. They did last season against Georgia and played a heck of a game against Georgia in the Peach Bowl. But I'm just saying, that's where things stand now in my honest thoughts. So in the few months down the line when we're playing football, my projections may change. I may say, I think, Ohio State's going to beat Michigan, or I think Colorado's going to win the Pac-12. Who knows? Who knows? We don't know until the games actually play, but it's fun to make projections to see where things and see where everybody stands now. So let's kick it off with the Pac-12. So last week I did it in divisions. The Pac-12 has no divisions, okay? So they don't have any divisions anymore. They don't have a North and South. It's all 12 teams, just like the Big 12. Whoever has the 1 and 2 spot goes to the Pac-12 championship game. Last year it was Utah and USC. USC was 1, Utah was 2, and Utah ended up beating USC in a rematch, and then they beat them again, and then they won the Pac-12 title to advance to the Rose Bowl. Usually, if the Pac-12 champion does not go to the playoff, they win the Pac-12 title game and they go to the Rose Bowl. So we're seeing who's going to the Rose Bowl this year, and or could be, if the circumstances are right, who goes to the college football playoff. So here are my thoughts. Here are, where everything stands in my, in my standings. So so there's no divisions, no North, no South. I mean, it's USC down to Colorado, down to wherever, right? So there's no divisions. It's no North and South. It's 12 teams. So how are we going to do this? You're thinking, Joel, you're not going to throw up 12 teams in one graphic. You're just going to cover yourself up in the picture. You're right. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go through 2 graphics like I did last time, 12 through 7 and 6 through 1. So we're going to kick it off and pop up the graphic here now. So 12 through 7, and here's who I have in the Pac-12 standings, 12 through 7 currently. California at 12, Stanford at 11, Arizona at 10, Washington State at 9, Arizona State at 8, and UCLA at 7. I have Arizona State at 8. I think they're going to be much better, and I think they're going to be much improved this season. So Arizona State at 8, UCLA at 7. Just because Dorian Robinson-Thompson is not there, I think, hear me out, I think that Chip Kelly knows what he's doing. He's going to get everybody, band together. Just because they lost Zach Charbonnet, it doesn't matter. They lost a good running back in Zach Charbonnet, but I think UCLA will be, still improved. But I think the teams above them, the teams I just mentioned, are going to be much improved. So UCLA at 7. So, that just, tears it for that one. 12 through 7. I think those are the teams that are that's the 12 through 7 teams. I don't think they're going to be necessarily in it come November, unfortunately, but I think some of those teams like Arizona State and UCLA will be much improved. So turning that graphic off, wipe that away. Let's go with 6 through 1 now. So you're wondering, okay, 6, you have Oregon State ahead of any of the teams you just mentioned. Well, if this was 2012, you'd be a fool to mention if Oregon State was ahead of any of those teams. But, yeah, I do. I have Oregon State at 6. I'm going to tell you why. I think their schedule's slightly easier than advertised. I think the games that they have that are tough, and let me let you read them off here on my notes. You have Utah at home. That's a tough game. Still, I mean, Utah, Utah obviously gave them fits last season. Utah had a pretty solid defense. It was a good defensive stand by Utah. Ended up beating Oregon State at Salt Lake City. Now Oregon State's going to look for a measure of revenge at home. So they got Utah at home. They got Colorado on the road. So they got to go to Boulder to face Colorado. That's a tough game because Deion Sanders is bringing his quote unquote Louis in there, Louis Vuitton for designer and fashion people out there. But Colorado he's bringing his guys in there, and it's going to be a tough game. Even if it's its first season, doesn't matter. Colorado's going to be tough to play this year. You're going to have to come and play Colorado, especially in Boulder. So, tough game for Oregon State there. They got Washington at home. Good. They got them at home. Still going to be a tough game against a highly prolific offense with Michael Penix Jr. and guy who's calling the plays, offensive coordinator Ryan Grubb. So, Washington, they got Oregon at Oregon. So, at Autzen Stadium, Bo Nix, Dan Lanning, you got a lot of good, offensive weapons for Oregon. You got a lot of good players on defense. It's looking, I don't know. That's an if right there. That's going to be a tough game. I know Oregon State's got transfer quarterback from Clemson, DJ Uiagalelei. That can add some more, star power to their offense. It may help them out offensively, but they got some tough games they got to get through. They played USC last season. They don't play them this season. That's a good key thing right there. Oregon State has 4 tough games, and those are the 4 tough games I think they have. In my honest opinion, I think the rest of their schedule is pretty winnable. So I could see them losing either 3 or 4 of those games because those are some tough games. Number 5 on the list, Colorado. Colorado is going to be a up-and-coming team. Like I said, I don't expect them to win the Pac-12. I don't expect them to make any noise in the playoff yet, but I think in the future they will. I think you just got to keep rebuilding and keep some guys in there. It's a rebuild process is slow. They're not meant to be quick. Again, I mean, I get it. You're thinking, okay, USC, was quick last season. LSU won the West in the SEC. That was quick. I mean, TCU, they have a new head coach. They rebuild quick. They went to the national championship. I get it, but that's not normal, those may be teams that are ready to take the next step now. Teams like Tennessee weren't ready to take the next step. They had Hendon Hooker, and they made it to his first season. And they made it to the Music City Bowl against Purdue. They lost the Music City Bowl against Purdue in overtime. Josh Heupel, right? That was his first season. They come back, and look what they do. They go to the Orange Bowl against Clemson and win the Orange Bowl. They beat Florida, Clemson, Alabama, LSU, you name it. They lost, and they lost 2 games. They lost to South Carolina and Georgia. Georgia was an expected loss. They were not expected to beat South Carolina, but they weren't expected to beat Florida. They weren't expected to beat Alabama or LSU. They weren't expected to beat Clemson either, but they did. They had the most highly prolific offense, and they were number 1 in offensive efficiency. That's my thing about Tennessee. Sorry, we're talking about the Pac-12 here, but you get what I'm saying. Rebuilds are slow. Colorado's going to have a slow rebuild. So look at their schedule. They got at TCU. They got to go to Dallas and play TCU. That's going to be a tough game right there. Just because they lost a little bit of talent at TCU with Max Duggan going to the NFL and Quentin Johnson and Keandre Miller going to the NFL doesn't mean that Chandler Morris can't pick up the slack at quarterback for TCU. Let's move on. They got Nebraska. You look at Nebraska and you're thinking, okay, that's another up-and-coming team. Colorado could beat them. Nebraska's going to give everybody their best game, I think, this season. I think Matt Rule's going to have Nebraska ready to play. I think Nebraska's going to shock a little bit of people. I think Jeff Sims is a phenomenal quarterback, and I think Jeff Sims could really do wonders up there. Transfer from Georgia Tech. So, at Oregon, they got to go to Oregon. That's another tough game. You got to go to Autzen Stadium, face Dan Lanning, and face Bo Nix, a potential top 10 team. And those are some players and some weapons on offense that are ready to make an impact. Tough game there. After that, They play the defending Heisman Trophy winner, Caleb Williams, and arguably the best college football quarterback out there. And they play Lincoln Riley in USC. But here's the good thing: home field advantage. They play them in Boulder, so they got to play USC in Boulder. Tough game, nonetheless. Then they have Oregon State, another tough game. Just mentioned it. They play them in Boulder. So you think, okay, it's not going to be, a cakewalk for Colorado. By no means, even if it's in Boulder. It's still a tough game. Oregon State's going to be a team to watch out for. So, we're going to see by the projections of the standings. I say Colorado's 5. I say they slip. They get Oregon State and beat them in a close game. That's how I look at it right now. But it could be it could be a totally different outcome. Who knows? Then, last but not least, they play at Utah in Salt Lake City. Last season, it was a blowout. It was a very, very hard game to watch. Colorado scored 7 points. Utah put up 50 or 60 points on them in Salt Lake, in Boulder. In Boulder. They did that at Boulder. That's the scary thing about going into Salt Lake City. Knowing what happened last season, but here's the deal. It's not last season. It's Coach Prime, guys. It is Coach Prime. So you got to think, if it's Coach Prime and he's changing the whole dynamic in Boulder, how close will that game be? You know what I'm saying? How close is that game going to be? Who knows? Colorado at 5. I'm moving on. Sorry. Oregon, 4. I think that's a good spot for Oregon right now where things stand. I think Oregon's got some tough games. Not going to lie. They got some tough games. They got Colorado at Colorado. Colorado's going to give everybody's best. They got at Washington. That's a game where Michael Penix Jr. is coming back. You got Ryan Grubb calling the plays. Michael Penix Jr.'s got some weapons to throw around him. I think Washington's going to look solid, and it's at Washington. That's going to be, careful there for Dan Lanning. At Utah, again, careful there for Dan Lanning. Utah has Oregon's number the past couple of years. Utah has beaten Oregon twice. Back-to-back years. They beat them. They have a 3-game winning streak over them, right? They so far, they beat them 2 years ago in a regular season game, then they beat them in the Pac-12 championship. They played them last season, won again. Utah looks solid, right? Who's that? So we got at Utah versus USC. Sorry, I was catching up on my notes. Versus USC. Even though it's a home game, November 11th is a date that they're going to mark on their calendars because Heisman Trophy winner Caleb Williams, the defending Heisman Trophy winner, is going to come in and try to outsmart that defense, right? He's going to try to. He's going to do his absolute best, to try to get that defense and pick apart that defense. So you got a battle of quarterbacks here. You got the battle of which defense is going to hold up. So that's going to be a close game, and that could have some college football playoff implications. I mentioned that in an earlier episode of Pigskin Frenzy on matchups that could impact the college football playoff race. So you got that one, and then you got the Civil War with Oregon State. So that's going to be a good game there. Close game as always. It's a home game for Oregon. So a lot of these games are at home. The only 2 games that I noticed that aren't at home are Utah and Washington in these key games. Number 3, Utah. You're thinking, dude, why do you have Utah at 3? I'll tell you why. They lost a little bit. And while they do have Cam Rising and they have and they have a good bit of offensive line coming back, they lost a good bit on defense, and they lost a good effective pass blocker and catcher, quite frankly, in Dalton Kincaid. So I think Dalton Kincaid is in my honest opinion, is one of the best tight ends, in the draft this season. He was one of the best tight ends there. He was one of the best tight ends in college football last season. Good, and it's a good pickup for any NFL team that gets him. And I said that it was going to be, right. He got drafted in the draft, but it's a heartbreaker, right? It was a heartbreaker for Utah to lose him. But I think they're 3. I think there's some winnable games on here. Florida versus Florida. That could be a winnable game depending on how, what Florida team shows up. They play them in Salt Lake. It's out of their comfort zone for Florida. And Florida didn't look all that good in the spring game. So That's Florida. Then you got at Baylor. You got to go to Waco the next week to Baylor. That's a tough game. Dave Aranda's going to give everybody their tough game, their toughest game. So you got Baylor at Baylor. You got at Oregon State. That's a tough game. You got at Oregon State. You also have at USC versus Oregon and at Washington. You got a lot of good games there, some tough games there. USC is a compelling one just because of the rematch, from the last regular season game and from the Pac-12 championship game. So you got that, and you got Washington at Washington. That's going to be a tough sledding for Utah, could be. Who knows? But it may be Cam Rising rises from the ashes, comes back from his injury, and helps Utah dethrone Washington or USC again, and they climb back into the ranks. But they have been the powerhouse almost for the Pac-12 these past few seasons. So Utah, looking good there, right? So that's 3. Number 2, Washington. You have Washington ahead of Utah? I do. I think Washington's offense and how they've looked late last season is going to roll into this season. I think what they did at Texas was good. I think it was a good game from Washington overall. Their game plan was good. They moved the ball well on Texas, and Texas is usually known for some solid defense. They moved the ball quite well on them in the Alamo Bowl last season. So I think Washington is going to be number 2. I think they have a good game against Michigan State, starting out at Michigan State. It's a very winnable game. I think Oregon is a good game. It's a home game for them. That could be a winnable game for them. It's at USC. That looks like it could be a loss for them at USC versus Utah. At home game against Utah, and then at Oregon State. Oregon State's going to be a coin flip because Oregon State looks solid last season, and we got to see how they bring that momentum into this season. So that's Washington. And then number 1, USC, right? They have games at Oregon, at Notre Dame, versus Utah, and versus Washington. Those are their tough games, versus Utah, versus Washington. Luckily, they're home games. They're still tough sleddings. Those are some games that USC, needs to come to play for. At Oregon's a game they need to come to play for. That's a game, like I said, that could could impact the college football playoff race. And then you got at Notre Dame. Notre Dame, they beat them by a couple touchdowns last season, but Notre Dame was rising from the ashes late. Marcus Freeman's doing a heck of a job there. Good turnaround there. We got to see what Marcus Freeman does, right? Marcus Freeman, good coach. We got to see what they do there. So, number 1, USC. Number 2, Washington. Okay. Now you think, what does that mean? It means they're in the Pac-12 championship game. So, Pac-12 championship game, USC versus Washington, a rematch. So it's a rematch between both teams. And who do I think wins that? USC. I think USC defeats Washington in a rematch for the Pac-12 championship game. I think USC is going to be proved to be too much, and Lincoln Riley's offense is going to outscore Washington's offense. And it's going to be a good battle between probably 2 Heisman candidates and could be a back-to-back winner in Caleb Williams and a potential Heisman candidate in Michael Penix Jr. from Washington. So USC defeats Washington. Again, I'm not going to give out any scores, but I think USC finally wins and wins the Pac-12 championship after all these years. Lincoln Riley gets his first Pac-12 title game in his second appearance, and Caleb Williams finally hoists the Pac-12 trophy as well. So that just about does it. That wraps up everything for Pigskin Frenzy today. That was the Pac-12 standings. And next time, we're going to look into more conference standings and talk about conference championships and what have you. So we covered 2 of the Power 5. We got 3 more to cover. So that just about does it for Pigskin Frenzy. A big thank you for taking some time out of your Tuesday to just listen and watch and some college ball coverage presented by me. Now, if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel, leave a like on the episode, and leave a comment down below. Spotify, if you're listening on there, share around with others, and follow on there as well. Podbean, if you're listening on there, share around with others and follow on there as well. We have Twitter and we have Facebook. Twitter, it's at pigskin_frenzy, all lowercase. All you got to do is type that bad boy in on the search engine. You'll find it. Follow and like the page there. You'll get episode updates as well as news, highlights, and notifications from across college and NFL football. Facebook, same thing. All you got to do is type in Pigskin Frenzy. Follow and like the page there. You'll get episode updates as well as news, highlights, and notifications from across college and NFL football. Big thank you for taking some time out of your Tuesday. Once again, Thursday, NFL edition of Pigskin Frenzy. We'll go over more, games from last week's schedule release. We're going to talk about some news around, the National Football League in general. So until Thursday, I'm Joel Norris signing off. We will see you for another edition of Pigskin Frenzy Thursday. Good night, everybody, and have a good evening. And to everybody out there, stay the course.